is essential to activate more investors of color, to create an innovative industry? And how do we make it in a way that it doesn't look like charity? Because I think that's a problem sometimes, that people say, well, I'm going to invest in a fund that focuses on minorities just because it's the right thing to do. But how do we change that perspective and show people, no, you're investing in this because they're the best at what they do, and we just need to help them? So thoughts on that?
I think one of the things that was said earlier is, when we deal with people, or we deal in backgrounds that are diverse, there is maybe common understandings or common language, and I think we talked about that earlier. And then sometimes if you're not from the same background, the same race, color, creed, gender, there may be some barriers to that because you don't understand how they grew up, you don't understand how they were. And I think one of the challenges, I think you hit on this earlier, is there's been such a lack of investment in this area, especially in regards to the VC. And what that is it's created this cycle. And this is kind of a really crazy cycle, is, the less VC money that's in here, in this area, is then there's less buildup in those enterprises. There's less buildup in those enterprises, so there's less exit strategies, people becoming philanthropic, exiting and having funds and becoming investors. And so there's like this vicious cycle that's been created, or even lack of vicious cycle, where there's no money going in, so there's no one coming up, and then so there's no investors. So I think BAMA and a lot of like what you're doing, creating diversity, investing back into the communities, getting the capital back in there, it's raising that bar. So we go from that 2% or 3%, which is a low hanging number, to hopefully 4, 5, 10, 20%. But we have to create a positive cycle where the money goes back into the community, where it goes back into enterprises, where we have people getting exit strategies. We have then people who have exit strategies, people like yourself, who become investors and then invest in diverse companies. So I think we really need to break that cycle and create a whole new cycle of positive investment in diversity.
Yeah, what I'll say, with our model, the reason why I love it so much, I was a part of creating it, but I really love it because we're not asking for money. We're knocking on the door saying, we have a check. We want to give you money. Just give us access to these great opportunities that you have that typically, if you're not a white male who lives on the East or West Coast or went to a handful of eight universities, you don't even get a chance to participate. So we're saying, hey, we'll bring you $1 million, $2 million, whatever it needs for us to meet your minimum, but we're going to meet that minimum with a bunch of smaller checks that you don't even want to manage. We'll take on that effort, and we just want an opportunity to invest, and then we reinvest once we start earning returns from that. And what I'll also say, while it's important to also include diversity in corporate America, I think McKinsey did a study where, it's well known that diverse teams translate into better financial performance as well. So why is that not or so hard to implement within the VC community, right? So if you know that, then and you invest in diverse teams and diverse portfolios, then you can experience the same returns. I think there's, I forget who did this other study, but it stated that VCs are leaving $4.4 trillion on the table by not investing in diverse teams.
Wow. And I think that goes back to the point that Beth made earlier, right? Where if you don't see the problem and you cannot relate to the problem, then you leave that money on the table because your team that's making the decision thinks, well, that's not a problem for us, right, but it might be a problem for more than half of Americans. So I do think that relates to that. I don't know, Jessica, if you wanted to add something on why it's important to activate more.
No, I think, just personally as a woman, you talked about the amount of flow to female-founded companies. And it's not that they don't have fantastic companies that they're building or that people wouldn't get a good return on that. It's that, from my own experience, not seeing myself as an investor or feeling like I didn't go to that Ivy League school, I don't have my MBA, being afraid of that. So I think when you get more diverse investors in every way in the space, you're going to invest in these other companies and it's going to change.
And I will get to your story later because I do think it's important, especially for BAMA members that have never written a check. But just to stick to the topic for now on activating investors. So I think education plays a critical part in investing. So whether you are a founder or whether you're investing for the first time, there's things you need to know, right? How do you learn about the terms on the term sheet? And can you give me some examples of maybe some programs that that you have in place to support whether it's the investors' education or the startups?
Well, one of the things that we've been implementing just really at the beginnings is like the transition for a lot of our students who are coming out is, they didn't even have like personal finance. So if they don't even know how to balance their books, how can they run a company? How can they know a spreadsheet or balance sheet? So one of the things that we require as a part of going through our program is that you have an ability to do personal finance. You have an ability to balance the books. And then we really start into those baby steps because you'd be very surprised, especially with people who are younger nowadays. They don't even understand. I mean, checkbook. What's a checkbook, right? We haven't seen one of those in like 10 years. You must be one of those old guys, right? Do you still write on stones? So, but when we finally start to activate those conversations, and that's what they are, the conversations. Then when they transition and start talking about businesses, they say, hey, doctor, they always call me doctor, which is kind of shocking because usually I don't get that respect everywhere, it's usually the degree. But anyways, the point being is they start asking, so if there's all these questions and problems around, my personal, what do I have to do for a business? What's a term sheet? What's going to be required? I had this guy present me a memorandum of understanding. Man, it's got a lot of words on it.
Right.
What do I need to do with this thing, right? And so what we try to do is it's unfortunate is we're trying to start those conversations earlier in their freshman and sophomore year, so they have that personal finance, they have those financial backgrounds, so they start asking those latter questions you're hitting on as term sheets, talking about finance. How do I, maybe I use like, instead of using credit cards, how do I go get a hard loan, from a financial source, maybe from you, right? But that's the thing that we have to do is we have to start earlier. We have to educate, and it has to start with learning personal finance.
So what we do at UCN is we do a monthly webinar on Angel 101 series. And we do that in collaboration with the ION, which is similar to the Canon. As a matter of fact, I'm doing one tomorrow. No, not competing. I say anyone in this space that's trying to contribute to the development of the innovation ecosystem, we're all on one team. So there's always some friendly competition, but that's good for the system, the ecosystem and the environment here. So so I'm doing one tomorrow, actually, and it's for valuations and term sheets. So most investors that invest with us, this is their first time investing in this asset class. So they're not exposed to just the nuances and the differences in investing in early stage private companies as opposed to the public market or their 401k or IRA. In fact, we teach our investors how to use and leverage their retirement accounts to invest in our funds through self-directed IRAs. So we provide that because that sometimes that's the only access to liquidity that they have, and it's not really liquidity unless they want to take out a penalty, but capital that they have, right? And they can move that into a self-directed IRA and diversify their portfolio from the traditional stocks, bonds, whatever it is they may have access to their IRA. So education is important, and you have to really understand that in this asset class, you can't check your stock every day. There's no stocks. You're not going to pull up Robinhood and say, oh, I'm up today or I'm down, right? Because that just doesn't happen. As a matter of fact, you have to almost wait most of the time for the next funding round to really understand how the value in the company appreciated. So a lot of folks don't understand that. They think they're going to get dividends, and it's really an education and lesson that they have to come to grasp with as well, and really be comfortable in putting their money away from 5, 10, maybe longer years.
So, Jessica, you're pretty new to the space. We actually just co-invested together recently, and it was our first check ever. Why don't you walk us through the process for anybody that might be a little bit scared to do it for the first time? Maybe talk about why you joined BAMA in the first place, and then how it was, the good things, the bad things, and it's fine. Maria will never hear about it.
So, as I said, I had met Maria, and I'm really interested in the work that BAMA's doing. And I talked to a couple other women who were in the investment space, and they were like, well, why, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I want to do that. I wish I was more. And they were like, well, why aren't you? And why don't you? And what's stopping you? And I would, and I realized what was stopping me. And so it was at the spring pitch event. There were a couple companies that I was interested in learning more about. And once again, still scared, don't even know the questions, don't know any, what to ask. But if I wanted to learn more and really get involved, then the best way for me to do it is to just jump in. So, we had a group from BAMA that had calls together, had calls with the founder of the company, and just going through that due diligence process together with people in the room that know the questions, and also recognizing that just my own lived experience added value, right? I didn't see my own value until I was part of the conversations. And, just getting comfortable with the decision based on the due diligence. We talked to one of the lead investors from the company, and then people like Andrea and Maria and Ahmed and others. It was a really positive experience, and I'm hoping that more people want to get involved.
Anything you would change?
No, I think getting involved sooner, right? Getting out of my own way sooner, and not being afraid of that.
I think it gives you comfort when you have a lead investor as well. We describe that as smart money. Once you have smart money behind the deal, then they may see some things that you couldn't see or didn't understand, and it makes it a little bit more easier for you to finally say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do it. If they're doing it, I'm going to do it.
No, thank you so much. So hopefully we'll make an amazing return on that one. Let's change the subject a little bit to family offices. And why do you think that family offices are so important to empower diversity? And that was specifically for you.
Oh, that's a beauty question. I got to be very careful with my answer. By the way, I don't speak for the foundation. So, but I will tell you this: is I think they're one of the things that I've seen is when a family and a good example is with Bob. Bob was always, we were talking earlier about teams, right? Bob was always very, to Bob McNair's past, but Bob was always very interested in people. And his thing was, as long as people would work, he was willing to work for him, he'd give them a job, right? And he was always, willing to hire people, no matter what their background, whatever, he was always willing to give them a job. And, when I look back at that pervades what is in our culture is we're very dedicated. It doesn't matter what your background is, where ups or downs, or where your degree's from. As long as you're willing to work, we want to give you a job. We want to get you money, right? And I not all offices or all families are like ours. Some have investment criteria. Some have different visions of wealth generation. But I think the McNairs have always been interested in reinvesting their money in the community. I think this is what you're going to get at. Is one of the things that I've really seen about these family offices is, and if they're done right, of course there are times when they're not done so right, but if they're done right, they spend a lot of time doing a lot of what you're talking about, reinvesting in the community, taking that money, recycling it, And so when they earn big money, when they earn the millions or billions of dollars, it doesn't just go off to somewhere in Bahamas, right? Or Bermuda, right? We've heard these stories, right? But it goes back into Houston. It goes back into our hospitals. It goes back into our streets. It goes back into, in our industries. And I think that creates this wealth cycle that brings everyone up, brings all the ships up. And I think that's something, as I said, is when we have a focus of a very good family who's really dedicated to the Houston community, it can do a lot of good.
I'd say that, family offices and high net worth individuals are probably the primary source of capital to VC funds. Mm-hmm. So, and they're starting to become more aware of the returns that they might be missing out on by not having diversity founders in their portfolio. So I think it's incumbent upon them to ask those questions. How does the demographics of your founders look in your portfolio companies? How much diversity do you have in those founders as well? So I think that can drive the efforts in VCs to start looking for more diversity. And by the way, you're going to have better returns on your money. Another way I think family offices can support more diversity as well is, for instance, in our funds, we don't exclude anyone. We allow white males and everyone else to invest in our funds. Mm-hmm. However, what I will say is if you're investing with us, then you probably don't have access, because you wouldn't come to us, you would bypass us and go directly, right? But these high net worth individuals that we have in our funds, and we do have them, they help anchor the investment. Because if we're accepting $10,000, $15,000 checks, we can never meet that investment minimum that we need to fulfill with the VC, or we don't raise enough capital to really diversify the portfolio. So those larger checks help tag along for the smaller investors, and it has an impact. So we need that kind of support. And also, I think if you have a high net worth individual who can write a $250,000, $500,000 check, we can diversify that check across multiple funds, multiple direct investments, whereas they might have a relationship with only one VC. We have relationships with many.
So how have you guys found it hard to get good access to opportunities that actually, meet those requirements to really, make an impact?
Actually, we've been cheating the system in a way, to be honest with you, because of the way we do it. We really vet the VCs. So we're largely betting on the VCs who have already kind of narrowed their funnel down to high quality deals. For instance, we're on our fourth fund, and we've had 3 exits already in 18 months. So, and that's not typical. But that speaks to the quality of deals that we get access to and the stage that we're getting access to them. And then we get some really one-off opportunities that you may never see. For instance, right now we're closing a fund for to be a part of the sponsor group of a SPAC. So this is pre-IPO. We're bringing this to our investor base. They'll never see this again, maybe. I mean, hopefully we'll get another opportunity like this, but these kind of opportunities are very, very, very hard to get into.
Do you want to add something?
No, I think you did great.
All right, perfect. So I'll have the last question, and then we'll open it up in case you guys have questions, which is what last piece of advice would you actually give our attendees? Especially the ones that, like you, just don't have the courage yet to sign a check, even though, when you look at how much VCs are investing versus angels, it's not that much, but it's still for an individual putting down their savings into a company where they're not going to get to check online every 5 minutes how it's performing. How do you like what type of advice would you give people to get comfortable and to really go forward to move the needle?
I think for me, and this represents a lot because I'm a serial entrepreneur before my later academic life, is strategic investment. So unless I don't understand the industry or unless I don't have experience in the industry, I don't get involved. So I have to know the people. I mean, it's good to know the people, have a great connection with the team, but I have to understand the industry. Sometimes, like I got into water recycling. Like when I originally got into water recycling, which is one of the deals I got into, it was quite easy. It was quite easy to understand the industry at that time because I had access to a lot of information. Whereas a lot of really high tech deals that are very complicated, I couldn't figure out what I was buying or not buying, so I would not involve. The other thing I would say, and I think we were talking earlier about team, and everyone's a team. The other thing I say is timing. Success and failure for a lot of my deals in regard as an entrepreneur and investment has always been timing. I look at the team. I think it's a great opportunity, but you've got to look at where's the trend going. And the old Wall Street saying, "Trend is your friend," right? Look, where is the trend going? Where is the demographics? Where's society moving to? And then how can I get in front of that wave, right? And if it's through a SPAC, if it's through an investment deal, if it's through a friend who's putting together a company, try to get ahead of that wave before everyone else is. And you'll be surprised if you're got strategic, you understand the industry, you may actually have knowledge that other people do not. I think we underestimate the knowledge that we have. Right. So use that knowledge, be strategic, and get ahead of the wave.
I agree. I mean, if you can get involved in an investment with something that you understand, that always helps. If you don't, a lot of the opportunities are in tech. Not everybody understands tech. So one bit of advice I would give is join an investment group, join an angel network, join someone like BAMA, join Urban Capital Network. Get around more people who can help you make that decision, because it's hard to vet a company all by yourself anyway. It takes a lot of time to go through due diligence.
I do this for a living. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of time.
and you have a team to help you with that, right?
And even then, you're not by yourself.
Right. So, it's always good to have others to help you vet a deal, do the due diligence, and make the decision.
I would say join a group like BAMA, or surround yourself by people that you can learn from, and also don't underestimate the value that you bring from your lived experience.
All right, so let's open it up for questions real quick. We see how time, right? Yeah. Anybody from the audience? Questions? Comments? Suggestions?
You're just staring at us.
Nothing. It was clear. So you're all gonna start writing checks.
We got
Right.
one.
I'll ask a question. Each of you, maybe if you could just kind of give me, Andreas or the Fortune 500 view of kind of the pain points of really, because you talked about portfolio diversity, and so what's the biggest hurdle? Patrick, if you can speak about that from, inside university, conversely, then answer the same kind of question as for the detail and Jessica the same sort of nonprofit. Just interested to be different. You come from very different worlds, so to speak, and what is different. Just kind of biggest obstacle.
Absolutely. So I could tell you. So I've worked in ventures for two different Fortune 500 companies. So before Shell, I was with Schlumberger in their ventures team. And I think the biggest issue that we have, not only for finding diversity, but just for the investments themselves, it's finding that strategic component for the parent company. So when it comes to corporate venturing, right, we're not investing to make money or make a financial return for the parent company. They know how to make money, right? Shell knows how to make money without me investing. But what we're really looking for is that disruptive technology, that business model that nobody within the organization really thought about before. We need to be the eyes and ears, and then we need to bring those ideas internally. So it sounds great, and it is a really great way to outsource innovation. The problem with corporate venturing is sometimes you will face the mentality of the people that work in the corporation that say, well, we can do a better job internally, or it wasn't invented here, so it might not be as good. Or they put a lot of pressure on the startups because they're used to dealing with vendors that will do anything for shell, right? And it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of time, but it's not really startup friendly in some cases. So I think there's a big pain point. I could find a great financial investment, and it could still not make it through our investment committee because we need to have that strategic fit. We need to ensure that we have deployment value, that we can actually implement it, and that's easier said than done. So it's like when you're looking at a company with 100,000 employees and you're looking to deploy a solution or a platform, it's not like I have to go and convince the IT guy and then I can use the software, right? It's like you have to deal with several business units in order to deploy that technology. So there might be absolutely a tech out there, but at Shell sometimes default to the bigger vendors, say on software. Like it's easier to partner with the SAPs and the Microsoft because they have a team of people that are working directly with us. So that's part of the pain points for us.
I think one of the biggest challenges in regard to St. Thomas is a lot of the potential businesses coming out of us are Main Street businesses. We can kind of is painted as Main Street businesses. And so, a lot of the usual suspects, look over that on, going on to other universities that have high-tech programs or biotechnology programs, all the very sexy areas. And the challenge with that is I think they're really missing out because like in a lot of the deals that I've done in my own entrepreneurial background, I was in the pallet business. One of the first companies I was in the pallet business. And if you ever want people to ignore you at a party, right? You start with, I'm in the pallet business. They will go for a drink so fast, right? And there's no bar, right? And they'll still go for a drink, right? And that pallet business went from 1 to 10 million in 8 months. And I think today it's 100 million. Pallets. I have another student who is distributing oil equipment because we went through the whole downsurge of oil, and he's reselling all the oil equipment that's been kind of abandoned now here in Houston. He's reselling it, and he took his business in 3 years from 0 to 10 million. And that's Main Street business, right? Can you imagine if you were on the seed capital fund of that $10 million business, what it is today? And he's easily going to take it to 100 million. So I think one of the challenges we have at the University of St. Thomas is we get passed over because we're Main Street companies. But Main Street companies, they have X multiples as well. And I think it's just part of my biggest challenge is convincing investors like yourself and convincing the investment community to say, hey, these can be just as sexy as deals as that, biotech farm pod company,
I mean, we did have the toilet company in the pitch. And to be honest, when we were doing the advisory board call, whether to present it or not, somebody said, oh, but it's toilets. Will people be interested in investing in toilets? And the answer was yes. Like, it is an absolute problem, right? It might not be sexy, you're talking about poop, but it's definitely a problem, and you could get a really good return.
Yeah, I saw that business. I loved it too.
I loved it. Yeah.
Man, I got an email a few months ago about new technology in pallet design. I'm gonna have to pick up that email. Yeah, I just kind of moved it over. I'm gonna have to go look for that email now and take a closer look at that company. Anyway, for us, the challenges are from an investor focus. There's really two challenges I think that stand out. One are the regulatory constraints that we have with trying to activate minority investors. the rules and regulations are there supposedly to protect the smaller investor, but I think it prohibits them more than anything. You have to be an accredited investor, and for those of you, for most opportunities, and if you don't know what an accredited investor is, you have to make $200,000 a year or have $1 million in assets that don't include your home, right? So that's a constraint in being able to find a lot of minority accredited investors. Part of the reason we need these opportunities is because we're not accredited. Everyone knows that the wealth gap is 10 times different between minorities and the white population. So I think it's 17,000 is the average wealth of a black household as opposed to $170,000 for a white household. So, that's a big constraint, working around the regulatory rules. And the other thing, which kind of ties into that, is if you're trying to focus on minority investors, there's just not enough minorities who have money to invest, right? So that's really difficult, and you really have to be able to scale across multiple cities and everything to really build up that investor base.
Unless we're investing somebody else's money. Think about it.
On the nonprofit side, I think that it's interesting. I've heard a lot of talk about teams in this room and investing in the team of the founders, but when people are investing in nonprofits, the team is considered overhead, and that's considered a negative thing, right? So people want the new innovative program, and they want it all restricted, and they want to really be able to control the dollars. But the principles are the same, and it's the team. So I would say those operating dollars are what nonprofits need, just like startups.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And let's go for the next panel.